I'm just waiting for our AV department to catch up. Everybody can ignore this, but there's a gavel down here, so I just really want to do this. All right.
Can't really ignore that.
There you go. All right. Everybody ready? We'll just get started here. This is Getting Mean, an introduction to the mean stack. I'm John DeYoung. I've been at Object Partners for I've been coding professionally for 15 years. Started out C, assembly, did most of my career on the JVM, and in the last couple of years have really moved over to front-end stacks, namely Angular. So this fits right into my wheelhouse. So the mean stack is Mongo, Express, AngularJS, and Node.js. So what I'm going to talk about today is all four of these things, kind of an overview. My goal is to build an app today in the next 45 minutes that allows you to create and list objects all the way through the stack. Failing that, the code is already written, so you'll probably see a lot of copy and pasting, and some live coding kind of mixed together. We'll see how much time we have. As far as each one of these individual things, I've given up to 95-minute talks on Mongo and 1-hour talks on little minute pieces of Angular. So we're not going to dive in 45 minutes to dive into really the details about each one of these. So what I'll do is I'll go an overview of each one of these, intermittently breaking into work into the code, and we'll tie it all together. Just a quick note, I had to throw this out there, a little note about package managers. I love this joke. What is Bower? It's a package manager. Install it with Node. What is the Node package manager? It's a package manager. Install it with Brew. What is Brew? It's a package manager. I know Engelman just loves the amount of package managers you have with JavaScript. So I'm going to gloss over a lot of this stuff because we're going to be coding live, but there's not a great internet until we get to the Angular side, and then we have some Bower dependencies as well. So what is Node? I'm going to go under the assumption here that not everybody in this room knows what Node, what Mongo, what Express, and what Angular are. I don't know what everybody's skill level is with each thing and what your background is, so we're going to do a little high level of each one. Node.js is just, well here. Node.js is a platform built on Chrome's JavaScript runtime. That's pretty much all it is. It's a headless JavaScript virtual machine. So you write scripts in JavaScript, you can run them with Node. So just write JavaScript. That's really all Node is. The Node package manager is a little separate. But for our intents and purposes, all Node is a virtual machine for running JavaScript. So here I have where we're going to start coding. And there's just the modules in there. We'll get to package.json in a little bit. But to show just how simple this is, what I mean, we will create our app file. We're going to call Node, and we're going to tell it to run the file that we just created, and we get our hello world. That's literally all Node really is at the core. It's a virtual machine to run JavaScript, at least for our intents and purposes. So that's our first hello world app for Node. So let's talk about Express. So Node has this concept of modules, and Express is just a Node module. From their website, Express is a minimal and flexible Node.js web application framework that provides a robust set of features for web and mobile applications. The easiest way to think about this is Express is essentially your web server and your MVC framework as a Node module. So this gives you your routing. This listens to ports and acts like, if you're used to Java, this is kind of Tomcat and Spring, or the Spring MVC at least, kind of all the same thing. So for example, this is a little bit of code in Express. We'll get to, when we start wiring this up, we'll get to what app is. But basically, I'm saying, if I hit hello world.text, execute this function. That's my routing. And I'm going to respond with a little hello universe. So I tried to name each one of these apps different. So we have Hello World, Hello Universe, etc. So let's build Hello Universe. Can you guys see that okay, or do you want me to enter presentation mode, or is that okay for everybody in this room? Okay. So what we're going to do here is we're going to add, we'll start with our package.json things, the dependencies. Right now, the only dependency that I've added all the dependencies that we're going to use today, which is just those 3. But right now, the only one we care about is Express. When you add these on and then you do an npm install, it will download these into a Node modules folder, which you see here, and make them available to your Node application. So we've added Express 4.9.4, and we're good to go. So now we have access to that. So this gives us Express using the module and require system that comes with Node. And all we're going to do right now is we're going to listen to something. We're going to call it get on hello. We'll say hello.world. So now we're listening for hello.world, and we're going to execute this function. Request and response, obviously, it's passed into each one of these, so you have access to those. And we're just going to send to the response hello universe. The next part that we have to do, this defines that, but we don't have a server yet, so we need to define a server. And I'm just going to copy and paste that over. So this code is telling the app to listen on port 3000. And then when that is done, when it spins up, we're just going to console log that, verify that we are in fact listening. So one point out before we run this. In the package.json, I have a start script, and I'm running something called nodemon. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm telling Node to run app.js, but I'm using nodemon instead, and that listens for changes and will restart the application if a file. So if we do this correctly, we won't have to stop the app and stop Node and restart it again, because nodemon will take care of all the changes for us. So I should just be able to type npm start. There we go. So it restarted, listening on port 3000. I'm going to go over to Postman here. Everybody familiar with Postman? Just a REST tool that comes with Chrome, or is available for Chrome. Unfortunately, I can't resize this stupid section here. But we'll do a get on, we're doing a get on localhost 3000 hello.world, and our response is our hello universe. So what we've done there is we've set up Express to listen for that URL, and we've sent a response. That is nice, but it doesn't do us a whole lot of good yet. Really what we want to do is we want to separate our concerns, right? So we're going to create a controller. We'll create a folder to hold our controllers. And we're going to create, I'm a dog guy, so we're going to create, instead of people or some other thing, we'll do dogs. So this is our dog controller. Okay. So the first thing we want to do is we just want to route to this. So we'll create a controller. So this is the Node module system, and we're telling Node that this file defines this module. So this is the thing that I want to export, so I can require it later on in a different module, and that'll give us access to this object that we've just defined. So let's do a list. Takes request and response, and for now, we'll just move our hello universe over. Yeah?
Exports, is that an express method? Is that a node method?
That's a node method. So node allows you to define, module is a node thing, and it allows you to define one module per file. And then at the end of it, when it does this exports, it knows that if you require that file, this is the object that you're trying to grab. Figure out how to route to it. So let's create a folder to hold our routes. I'm organizing this to be a bigger project. It's not in 45 minutes, but. So now we want a file to create our routes. Okay, so what we've done here is we're requiring Express in this module as well, because we need to know about Express, because we're going to create a new router. So that's an object that comes with Express. And then we're grabbing our controller that we just created. So that module.exports allows us to require this, and we just point to that. Since this is not a registered node module inside our node modules folder, we have to give it a path to the file, which is fine for now. So we now have access to our dog controller object. And
you want to call that dog controller.js?
Thank you. Thank you. So now let's do a get on /dogs. And we want to, instead of the function that we want to pass in is dogcontroller.list that we just created. And let's export this. So now we want to get rid of this. We don't care about the hello world here, but we want to tell the app to anything that starts with /. So you can use different routes for different URL patterns. We're doing everything for / right now. Everything that starts with /, we want to use our router, which we need to define. One is to make sure it's still running. It is. If I did this correctly, let's to verify that we changed hello universe from the controller. Redo our get. We'll do our get our new URL /dogs hello universe from the controller. So now we're routing to a controller. We're offloading our work in a separation of concerns kind of way that we want to do. But this doesn't really do us any good. We're just doing hello world yet. So let's quickly create some objects that we want to return. We'll give a dog a name. A breed. And yes, I have a dog named Bear. And an age. And we'll do another one. So our response object has this JSON method if we want to send back JSON. Since we're doing REST services here to back our Angular app, we're going to do JSON, and we're going to respond with our dogs. And now we're getting JSON back. So hopefully each step is simple as we build this up. So now we want to save a dog too. That's our next. What we want to be able to do is save dogs and see them show up in the list all the way through. So let's do that quick. It has a breed. And it has an age. And since right now our data store is simply a JavaScript let's do a push. We'll replace this with Mongo in the next step. and we need to respond with something. Do that all the time. All right. So let's try saving a dog. We're going to grab a post. We're going to post a dog named Jane, who's a poodle, who's 9 years old. What did we forget? Forgot two things. First thing we forgot is I forgot. You guys didn't forget anything. We need to register this. So we need to tell the router that if we see a post to /dogs, we want to call our new method. What we need to do, all the functionality in Express now comes in separate submodules themselves. So we need to grab the body parser. So this is going to allow Express to parse the body of the request. And we need to tell it that we want to use make sure I did that correctly. Yep, okay. Thank you. All right. We save Jane. So if we redo our get, we should see 3 dogs instead of 2 because Jane is now on the end of the array. So that's pretty much doing a get and post. You can do the same thing for put and delete, et cetera, using Express. Okay, so what is MongoDB? It's this thing from their website. I'm not going to. Basically, you can read it if you want to. MongoDB is a document store, so it is a NoSQL database. Like I said, MongoDB is complicated. We could talk about it for days, but essentially what MongoDB does is it takes JSON documents and stores them as BISON documents, binary JSON structures. There's absolutely no structure, so you have any number of databases you want to in your instance, and you have any number of collections inside of a database. So you can think of a collection like you would in a normal database as a table, but the difference is there's no definition of structure. So inside of that collection, you can shove any JSON document you want. Don't. Normally, they follow a pattern so that people know what they're doing. So basically, you have, in our case, what we're going to do is we're going to build up a collection of JSON documents that represent dogs, and we're going to store them into the MongoDB. It's a document store. That was my summary of that. Quick thing about this, I always get feedback from this a lot. I love Mongo, but every time I do a talk like this, there's always, and you can Google it, should I use Mongo? And there's, at least last year, there was this huge blog post that made it everywhere on Reddit and all these places about how MongoDB is the worst thing ever. And it was this story that this development team wrote about how they spun up a quick app with Mongo, and it was great because it got them off the ground and running super fast, and it starts up super fast, and it's super lightweight. But then they ended up writing a bunch of code to do all their joins themselves because they had a relational data model. So if you're going to pick a non-relational data store, you pick a non-relational data store if you have a non-relational data model. Just my little 2 cents on that. Quickly, what I mean by that, this is slides borrowed from a previous slide. This is what we typically think, or a previous talk. This is what we typically think of in a relational data store. In this case, Johnny and Jamie both live at the same address, so address is separate. In a denormalized case, but it allows it to be much faster. So in a document store, everything by nature is denormalized. If you're familiar with Mongo, you know that you can build queries in Mongo, but that's an afterthought. It's not the point like you would have in a relational database. All right, so hello universe with things, because now we're going to start trying to save some things. What we're going to do when you work with Mongo in Express or in Node, there's a library called Mongoose, so that's what we're going to use. But the first thing we want to do, we're going to create a new directory to hold our models. But in here, we're going to throw this file that defines our database. And I'm just going to, it's kind of an ugly file, but I'm just going to copy it over. So what we're doing here is we grab Mongoose. We create a DB URI. This is just the URL to hit our database. We're running on port 270, that one. And we're going to create a database called Doggies. Everything else here, these last three methods, are to handle closing connections. It's listing for system calls that mean your app crashed, so it can gracefully close the connection. If you're a Windows user, I'm sorry, and there's like 2 or 3 more of these things that you have to add if you're a Windows user, but you'll find these anywhere on Google, but just know that you should add them so that you don't keep hanging connections open. Basically, what we really care about, though, is creating that connection. So you can see up top that I have 0 connections open. This is my Mongo daemon running, by the way. So I have 0 connections open. What I'm going to do now is, if I did this correctly, we can require our new object that defines our database. And now I have 5 connections. Our app opened 5 connections to pool some connections to Mongo for us. So when it restarted, even though we're not, quick note on that, even though we're not exporting anything here, just grabbing that file and requiring it, script to be executed, which gave us a connection to Mongo. So that's connecting to Mongo. And now what do we actually care about? We want to save some dogs. So let's define a dog. The first thing, for any object, any model that you want, and then you can use that schema to create models. This allows you to do model inheritance and stuff like that, but for us, we just really want to create a dog. So we're calling the schema method to create a new schema, and the dog has a name. It is a string. It has a breed, which is a string, and it has an age, which is a number. So that gives us a definition of a dog schema. And then what we actually want is a dog model. So we tell Mongoose that we want to create a model called based on the dog schema. I'm just going to syntax is correct there. And we're going to export the model. So this is going to give us a new object called dog. And the model objects inside of Mongoose, we've defined what it should look like. And this is going to tack on some nice methods for us for finding and saving and all of that. OK. Solar. We need to require our new dog object. Now we have a dog object. So let's get rid of this that we hacked together there. And let's actually get some dogs. So we can call dog.find. And you can pass in parameters here. So this bracket is a list of things we want to search on. We could search on name. We could search on age. We could search on object ID. The thing that you want to note, though, is, like I said, Mongo is a flat document store. So if you do a filter on something, it has to do a full document scan of the entire collection to find the things you're looking for to Mongo, and that'll greatly speed those up, but exponentially increase your disk space. So it's just something you have to balance there. But we're going to call find, and then we're going to pass in a function callback that takes an error and hopefully a list of dogs. Quick note here. Most every node module type of thing library has this sort of pattern where I'm going to do a thing and I'm going to pass in a callback. And the reason is that JavaScript is single-threaded. And this is going to do some file I/O, database I/O, and we don't know how long this is going to take. So what we're doing here is we're calling dog.find, and it's super fast. And it returns back to the main event loop, so Node can keep going on and handling more requests. And then when it's done doing its find, it'll call that function callback for us. So Node kind of gives it that multi-threadedness that JavaScript doesn't have on its own. There's great documentation on that if you want to Google Node.js event loop. I'm not right now. But basically, this is a pattern. Callback pattern is a pattern that you're going to do a lot of when you are writing Node code. So we're going to do a bad thing and don't care about the error. But if you had an error, there would be an error object there. But let's assume we don't, and we got back a nice array of dogs, and we can respond. So that should give us a list of dogs, except we haven't saved any yet, so it should give us back an empty array. Too much commenting out. So we get back our empty array. Our Mongo database is empty. In fact, let's go take a look at it really quick since we're talking about Mongo. If I connect to this, we'll see another connection. Now we have 6 connections. I can tell it to show me the databases that I'm using. So when I call show DBs, I only have one database right now. It's called local. That's the one that comes by default. So as you remember from that URI, we're trying to connect to a database called Doggies. Doggies doesn't exist. Matter in Mongo, you can create if you tell Mongo, hey, save this dog document, save this document into a collection called dogs, into a database called Doggies, and it'll say none of those things exist, but you're asking me to save this, so I'm just going to go ahead and create it on the fly. So when we first save something, it'll create that for us. But right now, we don't even have the database that we're trying to work with, and that's okay. So next step is we want to actually do a save. Now our dog is a new dog, and he has a name. He has an age and a breed. Same thing here. We're going to call save, and we're going to call save, and we're going to pass in a callback function to get called when the save is done. It'll give us an error if one exists. Assuming it doesn't. Did I spell successfully wrong? Yeah, I didn't pass spelling very well. Quick, somebody. Yeah. Oh. 2 S's, 1 L. No. 2 L's.
And 2 Y's.
All right. So if that worked, let's make sure that the app is running and didn't throw an error. It's still running on port 3000. So we'll do a post now, and we'll save our poodle again. Successfully saved Jane. So now we'll do our get. And we have Jane, who's a poodle, who's age 9. We have a couple other things. Mongo created an object ID for us, and it created a verb for us by default. Now let's do one more. We'll do bear again. And we'll do our get. Now we should have 2 dogs. So we have 2 dogs in our list, and we can go over to our Mongo shell. Say, is that true? Now we have a collection called dogs. So we can do our db.dogs.find. We want to see all of them, so pass in an empty parameter, and we want to look at it pretty. and we see what we just saw. So we have these two documents in our collection. So that gets us everything we need to do from a back end. This is our REST calls that we want to do. We want to create an object, and we want to see lists of an object, given our time constraints. So now let's talk about the front end. So what is AngularJS? Show of hands if you've worked with Angular. Okay, good. AngularJS started as a way to bind data between HTML and a JavaScript object. It was just two-way data binding between what we now call the controller and some HTML. But then everybody said, well, I can't share. I want to be able to share data between controllers, so now we have services. And then they said, and I want to be able to extend the HTML, so now we can write custom directives to mark up HTML. Oh, we want to handle routing, so now you have a total of 3 routers that you can use to handle routing and the kitchen sink. So because of how this grew in such a spaghetti kind of way, Angular took the entire framework in a not very attractive way. Like I said, we could talk for hours about any one of these things, so we're just going to do a quick overview of how to get data from the REST services that we just talked about. So let's go back to the code. Can you guys tell which I like better, slides or code? So what I'm going to do, we have 2 options. Actually, that's my next slide. We can either, Angular code is going to be all static content. It's going to be CSS, JavaScript, and HTML. And we're going to deliver it. We can deliver it Express as static content, or we can deliver it as a separate app. I'm going to deliver it as a separate app. I like to do that because in actual deployment environments, it's really easy then to deliver static content, drop it into an S3 bucket on Amazon or a CDN or whatever you're using, and you don't have to do a full application stack redeploy to change static content. And it's lightning fast and super cheap. So I like to keep the Angular code in the front end separate. Some people disagree with me on that. Those people are wrong. No, I'm just kidding. So show of hands if you're familiar with Yeoman or Yeoman. So Yeoman is a template. It generates applications for you based on Angular, and it creates the template, and then it downloads all the Node modules and all the Bower dependencies that we're dependent upon. I ran ahead and did that before this talk so that you guys can never sit and watch things download over the wonderful Wi-Fi here. So let's run that. We can run a grunt serve after we've been. All I've done is told Yeoman to install an Angular template for me, or create an app based on the Angular template for me, and I already have it running somewhere. Well, that's awesome. Okay. Oh, jeez. Yeah, hold on a sec. Guys. So apparently it's the first time I've run the slides in this at the same time. There we go. So this is an app that comes from the Yeoman generator, or Yeoman generator, I guess I've been corrected. It'll take me a while to break that bad habit. this obviously is not what we want, but it gets us started. It's Bootstrap, and it gives us an Angular framework. So if we take a look at that, and we can see that we have a main and an about page, and that is handling these wonderful. We're just going to redo the main page for now. So we go to main.html. This is what we're seeing, and really we don't care about any of this. Actually, we don't care about that either. Okay, so this gives us a blank slate now inside of our index. Well, I'm not worrying about the template for now, but this gives us a blank slate, and what I'm going to do in the sake of time is I'm just going to copy this over instead of typing all this in. That would be the wrong one. Okay, so here we have a table of our dogs. We haven't wired anything up yet, but we know that we want to see the name, the breed, and the age. All I've done here basically is this is just standard HTML with some data binding that we'll get into in a second. We'll start here. Each row is an ng repeat for every dog in our collection of dogs, and for each one we want to spit out its name and its breed and its age in a separate column. So what is dogs? So let's go to our controller that's wrapped around this page, and that is the main controller. This is the stuff that Yeoman puts in. All right, so we're adding, this is a controller, and one of the things that you can hand to a controller in Angular is the scope object. And scope object says, here's all the stuff that I want to be available on the scope of the snippet of HTML that I'm the controller for. So in this case, we've added a couple of dogs. And there they are. So if we look back at that again, we have an array of dogs that we've put on scope onto our controller, and our HTML is looping through each one and giving us that output inside of the browser in JavaScript. So that's great. We can see our dogs. What we actually want to do is get them from the REST services that we just created. So to do that, we're going to create a new service. And we will create the dog service. And same thing, since we're running out of time, I'm just going to copy this. For now, we'll just return an array. We're just going to return an array from our service so that we can wire in our service correctly and make sure that the service is wired in correctly. In order to do that, in our controller, which should not be called main, it should have something to do with dogs, but we're just going fast, we can use Angular's dependency injection to say, we just created this dog service, which is what we named it up here. We just created this dog service and we want to use it. And when Angular goes through and creates this controller, it'll just wire it in. That's a JavaScript version of dependency injection. So let's just say, okay, dog service dot, what did we call it? I think we called it list dot list. And now we should be getting our dogs from I forgot something. So we've created a new file, but this is a static content app, HTML. We have a list of all the JavaScript that we care about, that we've created. So let's go ahead and tell it about dog service. There we go. We have to assign this to the correct module. Shit, that's what I get for copying and pasting. So our service is now wired in, and we're getting our dogs from our service. But we really want to get them from the REST service. So we can use this $HTTP service, which we've wired in with Dependency Injection. And that comes standard with Angular. We're going to tell Angular to return, we're going to tell this method to return the results of HTTP GET. HTTP returns a promise. If you're not familiar with promises in JavaScript, a promise is just an object saying, I promise you that at some point in the future, I am going to finish this task you told me to do. And then you can pass in a chain of callbacks. So the first callback that we're going to tell it is that we want to execute this function. We get the response object, and we want to just grab the list. We are executing a promise, or we are expecting a promise. So we can say .then and pass in the next callback function in the chain. Last one returned the data. So if that works correctly, this one should get a list of dogs passed into it. And now, so we are serving up our UI and we're serving up our REST services from two different domains now because we've decided to decouple them. So we need to make this a public API. We need to make our REST services a public API. And to do that, we need to add a CORS filter. And I'm just going to copy and paste it. Basically, we need to set some headers telling it what methods we allow from what domains. Right now, we're just making everything public. And that's going to be good enough for this demo. And there are the dogs that we have stored in Mongo, coming from the REST service. Got a couple minutes left, so let's add this new button. So we have this new button. This is going to error out when we click on it. Nothing's wired up. If we take a look at the HTML, we need to add that onto our controller and onto our scope. So we'll grab our scope object, and we'll tell it what add new is. And add new is a function. And it's going to dogservice.save, and we're going to pass in the dog that we have on scope. This is not correct. That's when we actually save it. What we actually want to do is we want to change this page to a form. And we use the $location service. This depends on which routing library you're using. If you use $location, $state, and then there's a new one that I don't know anything about yet. But we want to go to a state called new. And again, I'm just going to start copy and pasting this due to time. And we're going to create a new state. And we're going to create a new controller and a new piece of HTML. So there's our new route that we just defined. As you can see, all we're doing here is just setting up a row for some input. And then so in our controller is going to have a new controller. And now I'm just going to do the same copy and paste in the essence of time. The new controller is we're setting an object called dog that's going to back the form. It's on scope. And then our save function is going to tell the dog service to go ahead and save the dog. And when it returns, go back to the list page. So our dog service, it's posting to that same URL the dog object that we have on scope. And when it comes back, it's just returning the response.data, which we are essentially ignoring because we're just going back to the list page. The last thing we need to do is, in our index, is add this new controller. Page refreshes. So here's our new form that we just created. And we'll create a new dog called Aaron. Aaron, what kind of breed do you want to be?
Belgian Shepherd.
BS.
Exactly.
And age 12. Okay, so now open up the console. We'll save this. Sad panda. Okay. You guys are learning from my copy and paste errors. So this is actually the UI Scratch app, and we copy and pasted it from the UI app. That reloaded. Aaron is BS, and he's 12 years old. Save. And there we go. And he's back in our list, and if we go, so unfortunately we don't have enough time to do delete and edit and get an object, but that gets us 90% of the way through. And we have I have a couple more slides, but I'm going to skip them because the slides shouldn't. Basically, the two more slides, one was the coupling versus decoupling. We talked about that. The other one was, so there's three. There are templating engines if you prefer to use something like Jade. I don't know what there's another main templating engine for Mongo. I don't know what, or for Express. I don't know what it's called, but if you prefer to put all of your static content and build it up as one app and use a templating engine such as Jade, you can. And lastly, there's a lot of generators for this if you don't want to write all this yourself. Mean.io is a great website to go to. They have a generator that'll spin up everything, add security for you, and give you a great starting point. But I didn't choose them. And that's all I have. Anybody have any questions? You don't have to.
You used IntelliJ?
Yes.